Hey everyone, and welcome back for another deep dive.
It's great to be here.
Today we're going to be talking about Viagra.
Yeah, we're going to be diving into some really interesting stuff today.
And this all started from a question that we saw on Reddit,
Okay.
where somebody was wondering what happens if a person without a penis takes Viagra.
Huh. Interesting question.
Yeah, so I thought this would be kind of a fun one to tackle.
Yeah, absolutely. There are a lot of misconceptions out there about Viagra, so I think it'll be good to clear some of those up.
Yeah, so to start off, I guess maybe we could just go back to the basics. Like, where did Viagra even come from?
Right. So Viagra actually has a pretty interesting origin story.
Okay,
It wasn't originally intended as a treatment for erectile dysfunction at all.
really?
Yeah, it was actually initially developed as a potential treatment for heart conditions.
Like what kind of heart conditions?
So things like high blood pressure and chest pain.
Wow, so it's supposed to be like a heart medication?
Exactly.
So then how did it end up being used for,
Well, that's where things get interesting.
Okay.
So, during the clinical trials for Viagra, researchers noticed an interesting side effect.
I think I know where this is going.
Yeah, you guessed it, men who were taking the drug started experiencing erections.
So basically, they were trying to treat hard pra and accidentally stumbled upon a whole other use for the drug.
Pretty much. And, it turned out that Viagra wasn't as effective for those heart conditions as they'd hoped.
Oh.
But this little side effect, well, it kind of stole the show.
So the side effect became the main event.
Exactly. And that's how Viagra became the world-famous little blue pill we know today.
Wow, that's a pretty wild story.
It is, but, it's important to remember that even though Viagra is best known for its effects on erections,
Right.
it all comes down to how the drug works at a basic level.
Okay, so how does it work?
So Viagra is what we call a vasodilator.
A vasodilator, what is that?
It's basically a fancy word for something that relaxes and widens the blood vessels,
Okay.
so that allows more blood to flow through them.
So it's not just targeting a specific part of the body.
No, it's working on the blood vessels throughout your whole system.
Interesting. Okay, so with that in mind, let's go back to our original question from that Reddit user.
Okay?
What happens if someone without a penis takes Viagra?
Right, so that's where it gets really interesting.
Yeah, because most people think of Viagra as being purely for men.
Right, and that's a common misconception.
So is it true that it has no effect on women?
Not at all. Viagra can definitely have effects on people without penises.
Really? So how does that work?
Well, remember, Viagra increases blood flow,
Right.
and that's not specific to any one gender.
Huh. Okay, I'm starting to see where you're going with this.
Yeah, so in women, Viagra can also increase blood flow to the genitals.
Interesting. So what kind of effects does that actually have?
Well, it can lead to things like enhanced sensation.
Okay, so it's not just about erections then.
Exactly. Viagra can impact the body in a lot of different ways, depending on who's taking it.
So it's more like a multi-tool for blood flow.
I like that analogy.
And are there any medical reasons why a woman might be prescribed Viagra?
Absolutely. There are a few situations where Viagra might be prescribed for women.
Like what?
Well, for example, it can be used to help thicken the uterine lining during IVF treatments.
Oh, wow. I never knew that.
Yeah, and it can also be used to address blood flow issues related to certain health conditions.
So it's definitely not just about the little blue pill for men.
Exactly. It has a lot more uses than people realize.
This is fascinating, right? So we've covered the basics of Viagra, how it works, and some of the unexpected ways it can be used.
Yeah, we've covered a lot of ground.
But I've also heard about Viagra being used for things completely unrelated to, the bedroom.
Oh, you're right on the mark there.
Really? So tell me, is there any truth to that?
Absolutely. Viagra's effects on blood vessels have made it surprisingly useful in treating some other conditions.
Like what?
Well, for example, altitude sickness.
Wait, Viagra for altitude sickness? That sounds crazy. How does that even work?
So at high altitudes, the air's thinner, right? Meaning your body has to work harder to get enough oxygen.
Okay.
And Viagra can actually help by improving blood flow and oxygenation.
So it's basically helping your body adapt to the thinner air.
Exactly, which can ease the symptoms of altitude sickness.
Wow, I did not see that coming. Okay, so what other surprising uses are there?
Well, another condition that Viagra can be used to treat is Raynaud's phenomenon.
Raynaud's phenomenon, what's that?
So it's a condition where blood vessels in the fingers and toes temporarily narrow,
Okay.
and that can lead to numbness, tingling, and sometimes even color changes in those extremities.
That sounds uncomfortable.
It can be, and Viagra can help by relaxing those blood vessels and improving blood flow to those areas.
So it's like it's warming up your fingers and toes.
In a way, yeah.
Wow, so we've gone from heart conditions to altitude sickness to Raynaud's Viagra's resume is pretty impressive.
It is. It's quite the versatile little pill.
It really is, but let's be real here. With any medication, there's always the potential for side effects.
Of course, you're absolutely right.
So is it all sunshine and roses with Viagra, or are there some things people should be aware of?
Well, you're right. No medication is without potential side effects, and Viagra is no exception.
Okay, so what are some of the common side effects?
Well, some of the more common ones include headaches, flushing, and indigestion.
Okay, those don't sound too bad.
Yeah, they're usually pretty mild, but some people also report blurry vision.
Oh, that doesn't sound good.
And in rare cases, even a bluish tint to their vision.
Wait, blue vision, so like everything looks like a Smurf village.
Not quite. It's a very rare and temporary side effect.
Okay, well, that's good to know. But I guess the important thing is that anyone thinking about taking Viagra should talk to their doctor first.
Absolutely, 100%.
They can help figure out the right dosage and any potential risks.
Exactly. Self-medicating is never a good idea, especially with something like Viagra.
Well said. So I think we've covered a lot of ground today.
We have. It's been a fascinating conversation.
What stands out to you so far?
I think what's most fascinating is how a medication initially intended for one purpose
Right.
can have such unexpected and far-reaching applications.
Yeah, it really shows how important scientific curiosity and continued research are.
Absolutely. We never know what we might discover.
Well, on that note, we're going to wrap up this part of our deep dive.
Okay.
But be sure to tune in for part 2, where we're going to be delving even deeper into the research surrounding Viagra's potential use in treating women's health issues.
Looking forward to it.
It's an area with some really promising possibilities, so stay tuned.
Welcome back to our deep dive on Viagra.
So last time we were talking about the potential of Viagra in treating women's health issues.
Yeah, there's a lot of interesting research going on in that area.
So this is what I've been really curious about. We talked about Viagra helping with things like altitude sickness and Raynaud's.
Right.
But could it actually have a bigger role to play in women's health beyond what we already discussed?
That's a great question, and it's something that researchers are actively investigating.
So what's the latest on that front?
Well, one of the most promising areas of research is Viagra's potential for treating menstrual pain.
Oh, wow. Okay, that's something I think a lot of women would be interested to hear about.
Absolutely. Menstrual pain, also known as dysmenorrhea,
Dysmenorrhea effect.
affects millions of women worldwide.
Yeah, I've heard it could be really rough for some women.
It can be incredibly debilitating.
So how could Viagra potentially help with that?
So remember how we talked about Viagra being a vasodilator?
Yeah, it relaxes blood vessels and increases blood flow.
Exactly. And some researchers believe that by improving blood flow to the uterus,
Okay.
Viagra could potentially reduce those painful contractions that cause menstrual cramps.
So it's kind of like applying the same principle we talked about earlier,
Right.
but in this case, it's targeted at the uterus.
Exactly. It's fascinating how the same mechanism can have such different applications depending on where it's targeted in the body.
That's pretty amazing. So is there any research to back up this idea?
There have been a few small studies that suggest Viagra might be effective in reducing menstrual pain.
Okay.
However, larger and more robust studies are definitely needed to confirm these initial findings.
So it's still early days, but it sounds promising.
Yeah, it's definitely an area worth watching.
So what are some of the challenges researchers are facing in studying Viagra's potential for women's health?
Well, one of the biggest challenges is funding. Historically, research into women's health has been significantly underfunded compared to research into men's health.
Yeah, that's a problem.
It is, and it's something that needs to change.
Totally agree. But beyond funding, are there any other obstacles?
Definitely another challenge is the stigma that still surrounds Viagra. Many people associate it primarily with erectile dysfunction,
Right.
which can make some women hesitant to participate in studies or even to discuss it with their doctors.
I can see that it's like there's this taboo around women's sexual health that makes it difficult to talk about openly.
Yeah, exactly. But thankfully, I think things are starting to change.
Yeah, more and more women are speaking out and advocating for more research into conditions that affect them.
Right, and that's so important.
Definitely. So circling back to Viagra and menstrual pain, what's the bottom line?
Well, it's too early to say for certain, but the early research is encouraging.
Okay, if
Further research confirms Viagra's effectiveness and safety for treating menstrual pain.
right.
It could be a real game changer for millions of women.
Imagine a world without period cramps.
It would be incredible.
So are there other potential applications for Viagra in women's health that are being explored?
Yes, absolutely. Researchers are also looking into its potential for treating conditions like endometriosis.
Endometriosis. I know a few women who struggle with that, and it's really tough.
It is. It's a painful disorder where tissue similar to the lining of the uterus grows outside of the uterus.
So how could Viagra potentially help with that?
Well, the exact mechanisms are still being studied.
Okay.
But again, it likely comes down to Viagra's ability to relax blood vessels and improve blood flow.
Right.
So in the case of endometriosis, researchers think that Viagra might help reduce inflammation and pain, by improving blood flow to the affected areas.
It's amazing how this one little blue pill could have so many different applications.
It is. It really highlights the importance of scientific exploration and the potential for existing medications to be used in new and innovative ways.
It makes you wonder what other medical breakthroughs are out there just waiting to be discovered.
Absolutely. There's so much more to learn.
Well, on that note, we're going to wrap up this part of our deep dive,
Okay.
but be sure to tune in for part 3 where we'll wrap up our discussion with some final thoughts and advice for our listeners.
Sounds good.
All right, so welcome back to our deep dive on Viagra. It's been a wild ride, right?
It really has. We've uncovered a lot of interesting information.
Yeah, so I think it's time to kind of wrap things up here
Okay. Sounds good.
and maybe give some advice to our listener who originally asked that question on Reddit.
Yeah, about what happens if someone without a penis takes Viagra.
Exactly. So before we get to that, let's just recap what we've learned.
Sure. So first and foremost, Viagra's primary function is as a vasodilator,
Right.
meaning it widens blood vessels and increases blood flow.
So it's all about that blood flow.
Pretty much. And while it was initially developed for heart conditions,
Right.
its claim to fame is, of course, treating erectile dysfunction in men.
But as we've explored, it's not just a guy thing.
Right.
Viagra can have effects on women as well because of its impact on, you guessed it, blood flow.
Exactly. And it can enhance sensation.
Right.
And it's even prescribed for certain women's health conditions.
Like helping with IVF treatments or addressing blood flow issues.
Exactly.
And let's not forget about those surprising applications for altitude sickness and Raynaud's phenomenon.
Right. Those were some interesting ones.
It really is a surprisingly versatile medication.
It is, and there's even more potential for treating women's health issues like menstrual pain and endometriosis.
Yeah, that research is pretty exciting.
It is, and it's ongoing, so who knows what else we'll discover.
Okay, so back to our listener out there.
Yes.
If your girlfriend is still curious about what happens when someone without a penis takes Viagra,
Uh-huh.
you can tell her it's a complex medication with a variety of effects and potential applications.
Right. It's definitely not just about what you might see in those late-night commercials.
And of course, as with any medication, it's crucial to talk to a healthcare professional before taking it.
100%, they can assess individual needs, determine the appropriate dosage, and discuss potential risks and benefits.
It's never a good idea to self-medicate, especially with something like Viagra.
Definitely not.
Well, I think this deep dive has really opened my eyes to the world of Viagra.
Me too. It's amazing how much there is to learn about this little blue pill.
And I hope our listeners feel the same way.
I hope so.
So on that note, we want to thank you all for joining us on this fascinating journey.
Thanks for listening, everyone.
We hope you learned something new and had some fun along the way. Be sure to check out other episodes of The Deep Dive, where we explore all sorts of interesting topics. Until next time.